Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. Thanks for listening. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm the show host over here. This week, Kendrick Chittock is my podcast guest. He is from the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, a nonprofit conservation organization that is doing some great work in the mountain lion space across North America, United States and Canada, anywhere that has these mountain goats and everything. This is another conservation episode. I know we've been having quite a few of those here lately, and that honestly was not my intention. I wasn't trying to schedule a bunch of conservation podcasts, but it's very important what these organizations like the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance are doing. And Kendrick comes on the show to talk about those specifics, what this organization does, some very important facts and information details regarding mountain goat conservation that I personally never really thought of. You think of different, wild game commissions and everything being in charge of managing all these different species and everything, and you don't necessarily think about some of these species that have smaller populations than that of, the big game we all think of with, elk and mule deer and whitetail and all this other stuff. And, there's a lot of gaps in those conservation models, and it's not for a lack of these game commissions trying at all times. Sometimes it just comes down to the funding or the manpower is not there. And that's where organizations like the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance can kind of fill in and help bridge that gap that's there. So Kendrick talks about all these things in the podcast. It's a great episode, very informative about some stuff that they're doing. So hope you guys enjoy the conversation. Definitely put some things in perspective for a species that we don't always think about. Before we get Kendrick in here and start our conversation, got to hit a few things in the housekeeping world real quick. The first one is Hoot Camo. They are a podcast sponsor. I have been wearing Hoot Camo for several different seasons now in multiple different environments. I've worn it in Texas, I've worn it in Colorado, I've worn it in Idaho, and the gear is phenomenal. It holds up great against the elements. It is comfortable to wear. The patterns are very adaptable and versatile when it comes to functioning and working in different environments. You guys got to go check it out. Like the whole concept of these camouflage patterns and that they're based off of these three different North American native owls. It's phenomenal how these patterns work. So go to hootcamo.com, check them out, see what they got over there. Pick you up a full set of camo or just a hat, a shirt, some lifestyle wear, whatever you're in the mood for and whatever you need. You guys will notice that if you are trying to purchase a good, high quality set of camouflage, you cannot beat Hoot Camo's prices. And what's even better is we have a discount code for you guys. It's Fall Obsession 15. If you use that at checkout, it'll save you some more money. Hoot Camo and hootcamo.com. Go check them out. Trophy Edits is a Fall Obsession partner. I'm sure that you guys have heard me talk about them before. And if you listened to last week's podcast, we actually had Dylan from Trophy Edits on the show to talk about all the great work that they're doing over there. It's a digital taxidermy, guys. We all got mounts on our walls like the ones behind me here that memorialize and signify a great moment in the field for us, a great story, a great adventure, something we never want to forget. Sometimes we don't have those mounts, or sometimes a picture can do the same thing. And the Trophy Edits team will professionally edit and do good work on those photos to make them print worthy, wall worthy for you guys. So if you are looking to have a picture put on the wall in the house, in the man cave, wherever it might need to go, you need to let the Trophy Edits team do all the work for you and make that thing just absolutely explosive. Go to their website. There is a link in this podcast description that will take you guys over there. And if you use the code Fall Obsession, all one word, lowercase, that will save you guys some money. Dylan also threw out a discount code in last week's podcast. You guys will have to hunt for it, but he's got a social media code on there that you guys can take advantage of another little deal that he's giving y'all. So go check out Trophy Edits. Bear River Archery is the official archery pro shop and archery range of the Fall Obsession team here in North Texas. Justin and the guys have an awesome setup out there in Van Alstyne. They are doing some great work, and I trust them to work on my equipment. And that's saying something. My guys can tell you, I am super, super picky about my archery equipment and who touches it. But I trust Justin. I trust these guys out here to do good work. If you are local to North Texas, you have to head on up to Van Alstyne and let Justin and the team know that Fall Obsession sent you. Go check out Bear River Archery. You won't be disappointed. The Outdoor Call Radio app is another podcast partner. Outdoors Dan, he created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. You will hear our show, Fall Obsession Podcast, playing 3 or 4 times in that loop on Mondays. It's the same day as our new episodes dropping, as well as tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. Go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. It's free and you can start streaming immediately. And make sure that you are following their Facebook page because Outdoors Dan does some live radio shows throughout the week. And even if you are not local to those radio stations, you can catch the broadcast on the Facebook Live. It's Outdoors Dan and the Outdoor Call Radio app. Go download it today. Here at Fall Obsession, we have registration open for our 2025 turkey hunt competition. This is something you guys have to get in on if you are a turkey hunter. It is nationwide. You do not have to travel anywhere. You literally hunt turkeys like you normally do on your own ground every single year. All you are doing is registering your bird in the competition. You can save some money if you pre-register before you kill a bird, but once you kill your turkey this year, you have to document some certain statistics and then you can register it in the turkey hunt competition. We also have some great prizes from some event partners like Hoot Camo, Wiley X, News on Safaris. We have some awesome gear that's coupled with the winning cash pots for this competition and in a parallel sweepstakes that we're running with the event. Go to fallobsession.com and learn more about our 2025 turkey hunt competition and register today. I want to thank you guys again for listening to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. If this is your first time listening, please make sure that you hit that follow or subscribe button up there on whatever podcast platform you are streaming on. We always appreciate that and you guys knowing when we drop new podcast episodes, which is every single Monday morning on the normal podcast streaming apps and Carbon TV. And our podcast videos hit the YouTube channel on Thursdays. So head on over there to the YouTube and subscribe to that because we also have a ton of other content that's coming to that YouTube channel. We have several films that we're working on right now, some feature productions. One of them's already dropped. It's called The Steep and Deep Idaho Elk 2024. That's a hunt that is very special to me, and I was super stoked that we got to document the entire thing and put it out there for all of you guys to watch for free on the YouTube channel. We have a sandhill crane hunt, a Sitka deer hunt, and a New York whitetail hunt also in the editing room that'll be coming to that YouTube channel in the near future. So be sure you are subscribed over there. All the major social media platforms, you guys know them, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X. We are active on all those platforms, posting multiple times per day with regular updates from not just our brand and organization, but also our content creators across the country. So you guys make sure that you're following Fall Obsession on whatever social platforms you are active on. The website is fallobsession.com. That's where you guys can go to find all of our different avenues of content. It all filters through there. Our shows, our films, our podcasts, our educational content such as wild game recipes, written articles, how-tos, gear reviews, all that stuff is on there. We also have an online store where you guys can pick up a hat or a shirt, support the brand. We always appreciate that. And make sure that you guys check out the Carbon TV streaming platform. It's like Netflix for hunting, except it's free. You guys don't have to pay a dime, don't have to put in any contact or credit card information. You can just start watching. They have an app you can download on your phone, your tablet, your smart TV, or you can just pull it up in your web browser and start streaming tons of different hunting shows and podcasts on that platform. We have 4 different shows on there here at Fall Obsession that we produce. This podcast, our staff-inspired video podcast series called Couch Chats, is on Carbon TV, as well as our 2 different hunting shows, Midwest Mindset and Texas Dirt. Guys, go check out Carbon TV. All right, I'm going to stop talking about all this stuff, and we're going to get Kendrick in here to talk about the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance and everything that they're doing over there. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back. Another Fall Obsession podcast coming at you. This week, my guest is Kendrick Chittock from the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Welcome to Fall Obsession podcast, man.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to kind of dive in and talk to you about a species of animal that, to be honest, really hasn't been discussed other than maybe briefly in passing on our show before. So, and I myself, I'll admit, I was pretty ignorant to just some of the details I've learned about mountain goats just from researching y'all and preparing for this podcast and everything. So I'm excited for this conversation, but I want to kick it off and give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself to our listeners and give us an overview to start on what the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance is.
You got it. Thank you. So my name's Kendrick Chittock. I'm the fundraising coordinator for the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. I've been doing that for about 3 years or so for them. The Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, this is I think it's the 11th year of the organization. So it started as sort of a grassroots group of people in Montana who realized that there was, and we might get into this later, but one of the particular challenges with mountain goats is this sort of data gap that we have. If you compare the scientific information that we have for other species, elk, mule deer, wild sheep, we just don't have as much information about mountain goats. And so that's challenging because we don't have the info to make all the decisions we want to, and the long-term planning gets more challenging. So people started to recognize this, about a decade ago. And so they started doing what we call citizen science, and they would start doing goat counts. So they would actually go out with biologists and count mountain goats on the ground. So that was really sort of where the organization started. And so now we've sort of expanded that into a few different places. But the citizen science bucket is really so first of our three main avenues that we do our conservation work. The second is education. So when we say education, we typically mean hunter education to help hunters be able to tell billies from nannies. So that's males from females. It's not a case of like it is with a white-tailed deer, where one has antlers and one doesn't. Mountain goats, they look very similar. Now, once you get a handle on the differences, you can sort them out in the field, but it's not something that comes very naturally, particularly for those of us that are from the East and don't see mountain goats very often and head out to do our dream hunt. We always want to equip people with the best tools to be able to do that. And the reason that's important is that although there are some cases where they want you to take a nanny for population concerns in areas where maybe the goats weren't native, typically it's better to take a billy because the long-term impact on that herd is smaller in terms of numbers.
Gotcha.
So that's really our second bucket. And then the third is a conservation grant program that we have. So in another sort of way to address that data gap, we fund research projects. This could be, one of them that we've funded many times is something called Kaw Ridge, which is in Alberta. It's actually the longest running mountain goat research project in the world. And then we'll also fund, let's say, PhD research for people trying to get their degrees that are overlapping with mountain goat research. So those are really the three main ways that we operate. And we cover the US and Canada because that's where the goats are.
Absolutely. So I want to dive in on a couple of the things that you've already mentioned and everything, and I'll start with just the hunter education, and you talking about helping hunters that are wanting to go on these hunts to be able to identify those factors and anything. Are you able to give us just a brief overview on what some of those factors are that hunters can be looking for if they're going on a hunt like this?
Sure. So there's a few things that you're going to look for. One is a little more basic is this animal with a kid, which is what we would call a baby or a young goat. So if you have a goat and a kid, it's most likely going to be a nanny. So that's sort of ticks one box, and you move on to the next goat. When you think of their horns, the horns on a male mountain goat are going to have a very sort of consistent gradual curvature to them. Where on a nanny, they're going to have a little bit more of a hook on the end, not a 90-degree bank, but a little more of a hook. And the nanny horns are typically going to be thinner than on the billies. And one way to sort of gauge that is whether or not the horn is larger or smaller than the eye of the goat. So because you have the sort of black against white, that's a good way to tell. Some other ways, males during the rut in the fall, they're going to get dirtied up and have a bunch of just dirt or mud on sort of their back, hips, and haunches. And then a great way to tell is how they pee. So the females are going to squat like a female dog, and the males are going to stand like a quarter horse.
Right.
So if you think through all those things that I mentioned, that's a great place. You're going to get really close to being able to tell if it's a male or a female.
Absolutely. What so as far as conservation goes in general and talking about this species, and I know they are spread out across North America like you yourself just said, but where you talked about the data gaps and everything, and in some of my own research and reading about you guys and everything, it talks about how these are y'all's words is that mountain goats are considered one of the least studied and least understood of these species and everything that we hunt in North America. Um, and again, like I said at the very beginning, that's something that for me, I've never really thought about it because I'm from Texas. I grew up whitetail hunting, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I've always looked at it from a standpoint of just if I ever got to go on a single mountain goat hunt, it would be that once in a lifetime thing. And
Mhm.
I just kind of in my own ignorance assume that, you know, local states and their fish and game departments and that kind of stuff are handling the management and all that kind of stuff. But I guess where I'm going with that and where I want to steer the conversation, question I want to ask is just what are those specific data gaps that you're dealing with as far as um, are we seeing states that just don't have funding or don't have the knowledge, don't have certain resources to accomplish what they need to accomplish in mountain goat management?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the way we sort of look at it is that um, because mountain goats are living in an alpine environment, they have more challenges than something, let's say, like an elk or a mule deer, in terms of connectivity with their habitat. So if their habitat changes, it's much harder for them to go to another place because there's only so much alpine habitat, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. So one of the challenges with actually gathering the data, a very basic one that we talked about with the citizen science, is counting mountain goats. Um, it, they're not going to herd up and come down in one big group in the winter like elk, for example.
Hmm.
You actually have to go up there into that habitat and count those goats to understand what's the population uh, of that the group in that area. How many kids are they having? How healthy is that group? And so there's a few ways to do it. You can take a helicopter in there. Helicopters are very expensive, and goats don't love helicopters.
Right.
Eagles have been known to take a kid, so they are aware of what's going on, above them. It's loud, it's disruptive. And sometimes I was actually just reading this when I was checking up for our conversation, but sometimes when goats are spooked, they go to parts of the mountain that we would call escape terrain. So you would think about that being terrain that the human is not meant to go to.
Right.
And so what happens is they end up spending too much time in those parts of the mountain, and it makes them more vulnerable to anything else that you would have in that area, like an avalanche, like a rock slide, or just the steep habitat in general. So counting them is a challenge, and that's why the citizen science goat counts. Both people just love being out doing them, but it's also very effective. And we've come up with a set of sort of standard operating procedures with the biologists so that we can give them to other biologists in different states and different groups and actually have that data be more reliable than, if you and I were to just go on the mountain and sort of call in, hey, we saw 10 goats here. When you do it with the standard operating procedures, then it just gives the BAL just a little more solid base to pull that data from. So
Gotcha.
that's one way. You asked about the funding. On one hand, you have to sort of congratulate and as a hunter, we're excited to see the amount of energy behind things like elk or mule deer. I was just at Hunt Expo. That's an incredible community and organization. Sheep Show, the Goat Alliance is an affiliated society of the Wild Sheep Organization, and they've done an incredible job pushing the conservation of sheep. And so part of our job is to sort of raise that awareness around mountain goats as well, because I know that as soon as it gets in front of people, it sells itself, so to speak. People want to go count them, they want to hunt them, they want to see them. It's just a matter of sort of bringing it to the fore a little more often. So I think those are a couple things that stick out.
Gotcha. Very cool. And are there other organizations out there that play roles in this, or are you guys like are you guys like the big one that's front and center and that's making this push? And I'm not trying to get you to plug other companies, if you will. I'm
No,
just
it's okay.
curious
No.
if there's other people who are contributing to this, or if it's just you guys that are doing a lot of this work.
Yeah, it's a good question. And by the way, in terms of plugging other organizations, I think I've worked in conservation now for, maybe 13, 14 years. And the biggest and best things get done when you can have a bigger tent and have more people involved.
Mhm.
So I think it's better, particularly on the funding standpoint, to bring more groups in. I'm not aware of another organization that is focused on goats in the way we are over their whole habitat. I do know I think there's a group in BC that I think they come from more of a hiking background that appreciate goats and do some help for them there. But in terms of focusing specifically on mountain goats, I don't know of another group that's doing it. And
Gotcha.
so that's yeah, we take pride in that, but we also realize we want to keep growing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in that as well,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
You talked about and I'm sorry if this seems kind of like I'm rapid firing here, but
No, it's all
I have a
good.
lot of thoughts popping into my head as we're going
Yeah.
through our conversation and everything. And you talked about these goats and how they don't have, I guess I would say like a migration, right? Like elk or other species being able to move from one area to another, um, given that environment or changes in the habitat. What would change a goat's habitat to cause it to move, or do they just lock in and tough it out if something happens?
Yeah. So the most that I know about this is from a hunt that I was on. And the goats typically like to follow the snow line down the mountain. So of course they like to be in that alpine space, but at some point it becomes so inhospitable that even the goats are gonna want to move down. They are known, particularly in places like British Columbia. They'll get down into that timber to get some shelter if the weather's really bad. So the when I say migration, they're not doing these, certainly not like a waterfowl or a elk herd, but they do go up and down the mountain depending on the season or the weather. Are they having kids? So there is some movement. But if you imagine if you imagine a mountain like the shape of a pyramid, and you sort of are thinking you're looking at it an onyx or something, and you follow a topo line of the alpine habitat that maybe dips right down into the trees. When I was talking about the migration and sort of and why that's more challenging is because sometimes to go from one alpine environment to another is way more challenging than going from one valley to another, because they would have to go all the way down the mountain into an environment they're not comfortable for, or they don't live in, to get all the way to another mountain range. So there certainly have been goats that have moved to other ranges, but I can't speak intelligently enough as to how far they can actually go.
Yeah, I gotcha. And it makes total sense, but you were talking about when you mentioned helicopters, you talked about eagles being a predator for them and coming after the kids on the mountainside. And again, kind of light bulb moment, like, oh, that makes
Mhm.
total sense on why they would be weary of that. Are there any other natural predators that pose a major threat to this species?
Yeah, I'm going to consult my we have a group that's called, so we have our regular board of directors, like a nonprofit organization has. And then we also have a sort of third-party advisory group that we call our Science and Conservation Committee. And this is really cool in terms of the structure of this. So when someone submits a grant, the Science and Conservation Committee looks it over, makes sure the methods are solid, that it's addressing something, and they advise our board on how to give out that funding. And then they also advise on different scientific topics or whatever, so that we're coming to the table with that science-based management that we can share. And getting back to your question about the predators, the way that they were sort of explaining to think about it was, let me just scroll here for a second.
Yeah.
So they tried to break it down into three sizes. So there's range wide, which would be all the mountain goats, regional, let's see, coastal BC or interior Colorado, and then individual populations on certain ranges. So I do know that if, let's say, a mountain lion gets into an individual population, it can really devastate that population because it knows it can get to it and it'll see them as prey there. But if you were to look at the larger population of mountain goats, you wouldn't really say that like mountain lions are destroying their population. So there's that little bit of a distinction. Sometimes some of those come down to the locality and what's happening on that mountain.
I got you. That makes sense. Yeah. And mountain goat populations we're talking a little bit about management, we're talking a little bit about funding, all that kind of stuff. Are populations in general, are they staying level and steady? Are they on an increase? Are they on a decline? What does the general population of mountain goats look like right now? As we're progressing year to year and kind of the outlook for the future.
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the things that we're due to sort of bring up again and to dive in again is to have those population numbers and concerns updated throughout the range. The largest populations of mountain goats are certainly in British Columbia. That's like their biggest home, so to speak, and then Alaska as well. So you can imagine all those wilderness areas in those two places, why that's conducive for them. And then after that, it's a few thousand in these other states. Colorado has a few thousand, Idaho a couple thousand. There's other places that they live, but those are the ones that sort of stick out. Montana's like that as well. So one of the things that the citizen science goat counts do is if those numbers do drop, then biologists and the wildlife managers can take hunting tags away for that area. And if the populations grow, they can add tags. So that actually happened early on with the Goat Alliance on the border of Montana and Idaho. And forgive me, I don't remember the unit, but that was sort of a light bulb moment for us that we realized, this can really have, an impact. I can't speak to the individual populations. I know that in our last few goat counts, there's been some areas in Washington that people have been concerned about. And then BC has so many populations that you can hear good things in one area and bad things in another. But I can't tell you which one specifically is being impacted the most. But I can say that we are definitely keeping our eye on BC right now because that's such a strong population. We want to make sure that any dips there get addressed early on.
Right. And as far as how you guys are able to influence that, because obviously there's in all these states and all these locations that you have mountain goats, you have a form of wildlife commission of some sort that is also trying to do their job. Do you guys, and I'm not trying to bring up a sensitive topic, hopefully I'm not, but do you guys work pretty well with those fish and game departments, or do they want to do their own thing? I guess that's kind of an uneducated way to ask the question, I would say. But
no, it's a fair question. And, if you're operating in the conservation space, and we're in the North American model of wildlife conservation with big game animals, you have to ask those questions. So for us, that impact comes through a different ways. So one example is that we auction off the essentially the governor's tag for Colorado each year.
Mhm.
So that's one way where that funding goes back into the state of Colorado, and we have a representative that sort of sits on a group there that helps to see where it's being allocated and can have a little bit of influence in that way. But the key for us really is the relationship with the local biologists, because they're the ones that are on the ground and they're the ones that use our data the most and that can have the most impact with the information that we give them. So I think there's room for us to sort of build that part of our work. But right now, the focus is really on those biologists and trying to get them the data that they need to pass up to the wildlife managers to be able to make decisions about, how many tags are there, hunting seasons, and all that.
Gotcha. You're speaking very much so, as you just mentioned, in reference to kind of the North American model, right?
Yep.
And I'm asking this because I legitimately do not know. I've never hunted in anywhere in Canada. I've never
Mhm.
at least right now I don't yes, I have dreams to, but I don't have plans to, if that makes sense.
Sure,
Right
sure.
now immediately. How does that work up there with their conservation models, if anything, and y'all's role in that?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar. So when we think about that model, they're still using like Alberta or BC, they still have their provincial biologists. So one example, we actually worked with a few donors in British Columbia to get some money to some of those researchers that are collaring goats and doing mortality studies and captures and that kind of a thing. So that's the model is still very similar in Canada. Now, of course, if you're living in Alaska or BC, then you're going to have a much better time hunting goats because you can draw tags there.
Mm.
But for those of us that don't live there, we have a little bit more of a process. So
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So I'm gonna turn the conversation just a little bit because I want to ask you, you mentioned that just for you personally that you've been in conservation for I think you said 13 years. Um, has that just been with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, or have you worked for other organizations previously, and how'd you get into wildlife conservation?
yeah, thanks for asking. So after at college, I did grad school for natural resource management, and I sort of knew I wanted to be in the conservation world, but I didn't really know what exactly. And when I sort of returned home to where I grew up here in Northeast Ohio, I connected with a regional land trust. So I don't know how familiar you are with land trust, but they're private nonprofit organizations that buy and sell land or hold conservation easements on land. So that's really how I got involved in conservation work. And the second half of my tenure there was largely focused less on the real estate transactions and more on fundraising, like similar to what I do now for the Goat Alliance. But I also helped develop this program at that organization that got hunters and anglers out into the field. And then we would have guides that would donate their time. And then those hunters and anglers sort of got to know the environmental side of the organization. And, I mentioned, that bigger tent in the conservation world. It was really a cool program to connect those communities together. So I did that for a while. And then at some point, at some point, there were a few things going on. If you don't, as everyone knows, back in 2020,
Yeah.
but the whole COVID thing was happening. My wife and I also were having our first kid, and so we just sort of went for everything at once. And at that time, I was ready to try some other stuff in my life. So I left that initial organization, and so I also do photography and writing. Once I did the photography and writing, I also saw that this job was posted to fundraise for the Goat Alliance, and I thought it was a perfect fit. And I love the organization. I had been to Sheep Show before and had loved that sort of community. So it's really a great way for me to continue my conservation work while still being able to do my photography and writing. So it's been a great experience to connect with them. It's a good place to work.
That's awesome, man. Do
Yeah.
what do you do for writing? Do you write for someone or something in particular, or?
Yeah, so I do weekly, I do a Substack, which I call a Field Notes. And it's a mix, really. I do some ecological fiction. I do perspective writing, which could be, anything from conservation issues to spiritual writings to something more focused on a trip that I went on. And then I share a lot of my photography through that as well. And I'll share a link with you that of a goat hunt that I photographed. That would be really cool. People can sort of get an idea of what it's like up there being
Yeah.
goat hunters. And you might share this feeling, but coming from either the South or the Northeast or the Midwest, we get out West and it takes us a couple of times to get our feet under us.
It's no
And
joke.
so I was very comfortable doing elk and that kind of terrain. I've done that for many years, and but the goats is like the next level up from that. So it was cool to have that experience.
What kind of elevation are we talking about?
Well, so I was in British Columbia, and British Columbia, basically the mountains are starting right at the sea. So you're not really dealing with high altitude like you are in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
And actually, if I could take a Colorado diversion, my first experience with a mountain goat was in Colorado. My dad and my brother were they're basically bragging to me about how they had caught native cutthroat at this alpine lake, and I'd kind of heard enough of them. So I said, okay, I'll go up in the morning, before I fly out. So I hike up there in the dark, and I've got everything ready to try and catch these fish. And as the sun is rising, I see this thing on the opposite side of the lake, and I'm telling you, Sam, I really thought the thing was a Yeti, and it's this mountain goat, and the sun, the sun's like, it was beautiful, and so I never forgot that. I saw him again in Colorado when I was doing a 14er there, and I just always thought they were really cool animals. So that's part of the reason where when I saw this, the opportunity to help this group out, that I sort of dove into it. But yeah,
That's
that was
awesome.
cool. So the altitude is not going to be what it is in Colorado because the coast, it just doesn't have that much time to get that high, right? But you are still operating. If you were to take the top of the mountains in Colorado and the top of the mountains in BC, certainly there's differences because one is wetter and has more rain and all that. But it's more about the terrain than the altitude when you're in some of that range.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from Texas. I'm a
Right.
flatlander to a lot of these folks out west are in
Sure.
the mountainous country and everything. And I got to go on my first elk hunt this last season. And it was in central Idaho in the mountains. We were hunting at
Awesome.
around 8,000 feet.
Yep.
And it kicked my butt, man. It kicked my
I know
butt.
the feeling. I know the feeling. Yeah, the couple we've sort of been to different parts of Idaho now. But the one place where we really started going, I think our base camp was maybe at 6,000 and would hunt about 8,000.
Yeah.
And I remember the first year there was a guy um, who sort of drove by us, and he did this like double take. He sort of looked at us, drove by, and then he stopped his four wheeler and he put his head down and he kind of backs up. He's like, "What are you guys doing?" And well, we're out here hunting elk. We're super excited. He's like, come on a hike with me. Like, let me actually show you what's going on. So he explained to us the North Slopes and, how to bugle. And anyway, it was a cool experience because, yeah, we stuck out like a sore thumb. And this guy was kind enough to share a little knowledge with us.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thankfully went with some people who were experienced, but we did the whole pack trip back in on horseback and everything, and
Oh,
we were
wow. Yeah.
we were way back, and we camped at about 6,800 feet, I think is what it was, and we were going to 8,000 every day to hunt down.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was an incredible experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned a lot about myself too while I was up there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no doubt.
it was awesome. That was where I was going to ask you about too, is just the being somebody that works for an organization like this with a specific animal in mind. Not only that, like mountain goats being an animal that for a lot of hunters is that once in a lifetime hunt, is that once in a lifetime experience, and something that not a lot of folks in the grand scheme of things get to do, right? Um, how often you yourself are able to participate in hunts or to hunt yourself. And it sounds like you have some opportunities just with the photography and everything like that, which is awesome.
Yeah, so the short answer is not much. I haven't been able to hunt a goat yet. I'd love to. It's certainly on my list. It was great for me to photograph that hunt because I just sort of understood that aspect of the world in a more unique, direct way. I mean, like I mentioned, I was comfortable doing all the Idaho and Montana stuff, and so it was great to just try a different terrain and a different species. And there's a couple board members of ours that are, hunting goats every year of their life because of where they
Wow.
live, and it's amazing to hear their stories and their knowledge about the animals. So it's really cool. That there's a few ways to hunt them. You're going to have to be applying for tags. You're going to have to be trying for raffles or saving up money to do hunts. So just keep after it. And if you can do it, it's certainly an amazing experience. Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
anyway, I'd love to get on that list and get that tag myself, but not there yet.
Absolutely. What is the easiest, and I don't want to make it sound like any part of it is easy, but if somebody is wanting to do this, like what would you recommend are their best options to go through to try and make a hunt like this happen?
Yeah, well, option 1A and 1B would be to establish residency in BC and Alaska. Outside of that, I think number two would be check out Go Hunt, who's actually a great supporter of ours, and play the tag game. Goat hunts now, and this is sort of an estimate because there's a bit of a range, but they're about $20,000 if you're going to just go do one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the number that you need to think about. But there's a few that are a little less, some that are a little more. Depends on what you're looking at, depends on where you're willing to go. But as to the tags, I think you got to just start applying and chat with someone that knows how to apply for that. Yeah, I couldn't tell you all the details to the tag game for that species, but I know that the people that do it more often will have good answers for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that dollar figure you put out there, right? There's a lot of different things that money is going towards, obviously, to logistically accomplish it and everything. But for the goat tag itself, and we can even talk about, the governor's tag in Colorado, because my understanding is that is a pretty high dollar auction every year. Is that money going right back for that tag or any tag? Is that money going right back into just the general conservation bucket, or is that money going towards mountain goats specifically?
That's a good question. I couldn't answer specifically for each state. I know that generally when you're buying those tags, that money's going to go back to the state. Now, does it go specifically for goats or specifically or more generally? I don't know for sure because I think it might depend on the state.
Mhm.
I do know that when they do specific species raffles or auctions, that it goes back for that species. So like when we do the mountain goat tag in Colorado, that's going for mountain goats.
Gotcha.
I think the same is true when you see some of these other auctions. There was it was $1.3 million sheep tag that went. I think it was New Mexico. It might have been Arizona. I'm pretty sure it was New Mexico. So that money's going back in for sheep conservation as well. So when you have specific species things, I know Alberta just started something else. They actually had to cancel their goat season for many years, and they just reopened it to have a tag or two. But now that is another source for mountain goats in that province.
Absolutely. Wow. That's crazy. And I guess stemming off of that too, and there might be some of this you are privy to and maybe not, because I know y'all are obviously the separate organization from
Mhm.
the fish and game departments and everything, but and it's probably herd specific too, but I wanted to ask just as far as what kind of budget, and maybe you can speak to it from your perspective, but what kind of budget is needed to properly, address just mountain goat conservation in general?
Sam, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for you, but I'm now going to find an answer because I think that's a great way to explain to people, the amount of energy and funding that's needed. I think it probably varies by state, just based on the population
Right.
numbers. But yeah, I couldn't tell you like if a biologist said, "Hey, we need X amount of money," to help mountain goats. Certainly there's specific projects of numbers that we could find, but I don't know what the broader number would be.
Yeah, I would imagine, like you just said, it's specific to different areas and populations and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it again, speaking like I did earlier from just my own ignorance, I look at a state that I don't live in. I look at their fish and game department, and it's just all right.
Hmm.
Well, they obviously have a budget to work with, and they have all these different species they're required to manage. But
Sure.
when you actually start thinking about and breaking it down, well, okay, elk and mule deer and pronghorn in Colorado or wherever may be way more popular. So how much more effort is obviously going into those more
Right.
popular and populated species than goats themselves? So it's something,
Yeah, it's a good question.
yeah, something
Good question.
that's
And
I don't always think
there
about.
is some of that. I'm sorry, Sam. Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, I'm done. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's certainly some of that. And I think in some respects, it's very fair because if you and I were a wildlife manager and we were sort of looking at let's say we have $1 million funding pot or whatever, if 500 of that comes from a certain group or particular tag sales, 250 comes from another, 100 from another, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I should probably focus on these big three species first because that's where the funding is, that's where the tag sales are. So I'm sure that there's a balance that they have to play on that state level, while sort of supporting the things that are more popular and driving the revenue, but then also making sure that species aren't left off the map. And I think my impression is that it's getting more holistic as we sort of get into this North American model more and it matures. But it's definitely something that they're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's something I've been paying more attention to, and we've actually it wasn't my intention, but here lately on the past several podcast episodes, actually here recently,
Mhm.
we've had a lot of conservation discussions at various capacities, both just with our in-house team and a couple episodes ago, I had John Stallone from Howl for Wildlife on here talking about wolves and mountain
Okay.
lions and stuff going on in Colorado specifically and that kind of stuff. So I have been paying more attention in the past couple years to what's going on outside of my own state because it's easy for somebody to look at it and be like, well, man, I don't have mountain goats in Texas, right? So what do I
Mhm.
care, right? But
Yeah.
I feel like organizations such as yours, it's a whole lot more. It's very important that you guys have the support, obviously, not from just the people who want to go goat hunting, because the ability to properly manage and have appropriate conservation techniques for all these different species and everything, it plays out in the longer game of just sustaining hunting in general for years and years to come. And hunting is conservation at the end of the day. Like you are an example. You're a guy who is a hunter who is working for a conservation organization to help sustain a long-term environment and population numbers for the species. So
Sure. Yeah, I think you're onto something there for sure. For me personally, uh, I've always loved the outdoors. I came to hunting as an adult. After grad school, I came back and was working. And so I taught my one buddy how to fly fish. He taught me how to hunt, and then we just started, doing the trips together and that kind of thing. But hunting really did something for me when I came home to Northeast Ohio. I had been away in the mountains for school and overseas for grad school, and just these amazing places, right, that people want to go to and are sort of lifetime trips. And my my home woods, if you will, my stomping grounds, they felt a bit small. And it wasn't until I started hunting that, I realized that there was way more depth in the woods that I had inhabited my whole life, that hunting really opened up for me.
yeah.
So I'm not saying that hunting is the only way to connect with the land, but I am saying that it is a tremendous pathway to have an amazing relationship with nature, frankly. And so that's why that part of my work has always sort of stuck with me. And then the larger conservation thing you talked about, Colorado. We sent an email blast out and chatted with a lot of folks about the mountain lion issue in Colorado. I did something personally on my Substack for that because it is very important that I'm big on process, I guess, is an easier way to say this. So if we have the right process in our wildlife management, then it's in the long run, I think it's going to work out. There might be some small mishaps along the way. Sure, that happens with everybody and everything. But generally, when we start messing with the process in a way that's not deliberate and we're not really thinking through it, and I think that bill about the cat hunting in Colorado was a perfect example. That's not a process or a model that we want to use in other states and other places. So it was important, and it was good to see the larger hunting community get behind that one to sort of make that impact and stop it. So yeah, it's good to hear that you're having those people on. And gosh, the wolf one, that I know enough to know that I don't know enough about that topic for sure.
Yeah, I know that, and I won't dwell on it for the purpose of this episode necessarily, but
Mhm.
I can only imagine, like, I mean, you've already talked about, the specific example of, a mountain lion finding a herd of goats, right? And just kind
Mhm.
of, bringing havoc to that specific isolated herd on a mountain range and everything. But I can only imagine if Proposition 127 went through, the impact it could have on a species like that long term, right?
Sure.
That would be challenging, and it'll be interesting to see how wolves play out. I know there's other organizations that are hopefully maybe going to try to play the long game in addressing that
Mhm.
situation. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But
Yeah, yeah, it's also tough for someone like me, but I think this applies to others as well. I'm not living with wolves on a daily basis. I mean, I
mhm,
love the idea of having wolves on the landscape. I did get to hear one howl on a recent trip, which was really cool.
that's awesome.
Uh, but to drill down to the specific management aspects of that, I'm not living that every day. And
Mhm.
so I think what you're doing, having people on, trying to learn about it. I think it's really critical. There's a big difference between me seeing, two coyotes run through my backyard, and having a wolf pack or having someone who's making a living off of livestock. And
Yeah,
so anyway, there's a lot of things going on there, but yeah, it's good to talk and listen about it.
absolutely, man. I have to ask, because you've talked about being from Ohio and
Yeah.
having your home ground and everything there that you've spent some time on and everything. Um, do you have just a massive Ohio whitetail on your wall anywhere? Because when you said that, I guarantee you all my whitetail listeners to this episode, probably their ears perked up. It was like, oh, Ohio, big deer up in
Yeah,
Ohio.
no, I don't. I have so my the first whitetail that I killed is mounted. It's still at my parents' home, which is a bit further out from where I am now in the suburbs. So that's my best deer. I've taken a few others, and then gosh, about 4 years ago, about the same time, maybe the year before I was switching jobs and having a kid, I switched to traditional archery, and I have yet to take something, Sam. So I need your help.
Wow.
I was super cocky like the first year and a half, and was just hunting like I normally would hunt with a compound and letting certain things go, and then just hit a dry spell, and so yeah, yeah. So that first deer I do have mounted, and it probably needs to get brought into the office, but no monster yet.
Yeah. So let me back up for just a second, and I might have missed the detail. Are you exclusively traditional archery now?
Now I am, yeah, yeah. I sold
Wow.
I sold the compound. I just felt like, for me, and this is probably the artist in me coming out, but it's just what feels right to me and the way that I like to be in the woods. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep at it, and it's gonna happen. So
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's all you can do. I haven't made the switch to traditional archery. I'm kind of scared to dip my toe in that water, if I'm
well,
being
I'm sorry,
honest
I'm
with you.
probably not pumping you up now for it.
But I did go archery only 11 years ago. And so
Cool.
I haven't I save I do have a rule, just because I'm down here in Texas, that wild pigs and coyotes, I will pick up a firearm for those, just because they can be
Uh-huh.
pretty invasive down here. But outside that, for big game hunting and meat and all that kind of stuff, I'm archery only now. But again, haven't
Awesome, man.
haven't made the jump to too traditional yet. I got some friends that do it exclusively, and they tempt me all the time. So
Yeah, we'll get your, in Ohio, what some guys do is they'll get their buck and then with a compound or whatever they're using, and then then maybe they'll switch to doing the trad bow or it's kind of interesting just growing up here and not growing up hunting. When I did get into hunting, I was doing the compound, and actually I have a German short hair pointer who's going to be 10 this year. So I used to do a lot more bird hunting with her. So the shotguns and bows were sort of what I was used to. And now being more exposed to things out west, I think I need to pick up a rifle finally and start applying for that and just have more time in the field, because I think that's the thing that matters the most. I don't want to be so ideological that I miss out on chances to be in the mountains. And man, when you're in those places out west that you experienced, it's handy to have a rifle.
it is. I would man, I'm convicted. I'll say it that way. I'm convicted
Mhm.
to my archery only mentality because I have been pronghorn hunting, mule deer hunting, and elk hunting now, and I have stuck to my archery only mentality. I do
Good
have
for
a
you, man.
pronghorn and a mule deer on my bow or on my wall from my bow. I do not have an elk, and if I had been a rifle hunter, I would have an elk for sure.
Yeah.
But I remain convicted, and I don't regret my decision. Yes, it would be nice, but I don't regret it, I guess, is a good thing. So,
No, I think that's all good, man. I mean, like I was just telling you about the traditional bow, it's gonna mean a lot when it happens, and it's gonna be the same for the elk, man. When
oh
you
yeah,
get that down, it's gonna be really cool. So yeah, yeah, keep after it. It'll happen.
oh yeah, man. Well, I want to give you a chance if there's anything with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance that we haven't covered. Obviously, we'll
Mhm.
we'll talk here in a second about how folks can get involved and contribute. But is there anything that
Sure.
you guys are doing or actively involved in that you want us to know about outside of what we've already discussed?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to think about. We actually just finished up our online auction, so we do that annually. So that's a big fundraiser for us. So it's a great way. We typically do it after show season every year. That's one easy way. We also do some crowdfunding. So when we do have those specific research projects, like Call Ridge, which is the one we supported last year, instead of just sort of pulling from our conservation fund, we'll put it out directly to the public. So if it's something that you really are interested in or you really care about, you can give to it while it's live, during that week, or it's sometimes a month that we keep it up to help fundraise for them. And then, the other thing is we were sort of talking about larger conservation issues, and um, I'm always sort of amazed and I'm laughing because I'm sort of pulling this species in, and they've never done anything to me, but the panda bear just blows my mind. Like the amount of money that has gone into panda bear conservation. I mean, look, that's great. Like, let's celebrate that amount of money. But I think mountain goats are way more iconic and cool than a panda bear and a lot of other species, frankly. And they are by a lot of people's estimation, generally the hardest hunt in North America. And you just have to have um, a certain focus and a certain mentality to make it happen. So I think they're fantastic animals, and being here with you and talking with others is a great way to sort of raise the awareness and get people into them. That they're running into a lot of the same issues that a lot of other species are. So I think we need to raise that awareness aspect. And then the other thing is you clued into something about fundraising and the hunting community supporting conservation. Um, if I were to rely only on mountain goat hunters to fund the Goat Alliance, we wouldn't be around that long, frankly.
Right.
I mean, mountain goat hunters, it is the small percent of a small. I mean, if you take all hunters, then you go down to mountain hunters, and then you go to archery hunters, and then whatever. I mean, it's a very small community, and so we are able to be successful because the whole hunting community supports us. And so we're very grateful for that. And, we'd love to eventually get those hikers on those trails in Colorado or Washington to do the same thing. But that hunting community is really supportive. And so, yeah, just thank you to those that do now. And yeah, I hope to see the rest of you.
Absolutely, man. Well, I got a couple of questions that are I do want to ask you. They're not
Yeah.
necessarily related to the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, but
Okay.
you're a first time guest on the show, and I typically try to ask a couple of questions, just general hunting related to
Sure.
every first time guest that we have on here. And the first one just being, tell us about your favorite hunting memory that you have.
Yeah. Wow. My favorite hunting memory. Jeez. There's so many. I'm sure you've heard this many times, but there are so many, and it's
Hey,
tough to.
I like it when somebody has to stop and think about it because that just tells me that you've had a lot of great experiences in the field in your
Yeah, yeah.
lifetime. So
I really think, I mean, there have been beautiful moments on the mountains or, finally getting done with a pack out. As the photographer, I am also a person who packs out meat. So that I've shared in that pain. But for me, really, my heart is sort of at the wall tent out in Idaho for elk season, and I think sometimes whether the weather's bad or the schedule works out, and you're sitting out there with no service, you've got the stove going, you might have a drink and some kind of venison or something, and I just think that moment for me sort of encapsulates the hunting experience. And as I'm saying this, I'm going to translate it now to the goat world, which is when we were on that goat hunt. Um, we had it was there were several of us, but at one point it was a father and son and I and two other guys, and they were having the goat that they had just taken off the mountain, and the the elder statesman of our group anyway, he pulls out some special sort of fixins that he has for this goat meat, and it was it's fantastic. He cooked it up in whatever butter, whatever he had, and some seasoning. And I said, hey, what was that seasoning that you used? Like, is that top secret? Because you know how hunters get with their spots
Oh
and their,
yeah, secret recipes.
I was
Yeah.
like, so is this your what's your top secret thing? He goes, yeah, man, it's Montreal steak seasoning. And I just kind of laughed and I was like, that is like the most common seasoning ever. So I'm giving away one of his secrets, but he doesn't know it's not a secret, so that's
It's
okay.
good, man. I literally put it on a venison steak I cooked last night. I'm not even
Oh
joking.
yeah.
It's
No, I like.
good.
I mean, it's great. There's no fault. It's anyway. I was just laughing. So I would say moments like that. The only other one I want to throw in is this is a long ramble to your question, but you just get me
No,
all
it's
you
good.
got me all excited about it. The other thing is that moment between when an elk bugles back and you're trying to position yourself to kill the elk. It's sort of this like weird space of time where there's nothing else going on, and you're just everything's your senses are super heightened and you can hear the elk and you try and position yourself and the wind is going. And so anyway, I would say those two times, around the fire and face to face with an elk, I would say are my two favorites.
Man, you took me back to October when I was up there just now.
Yeah,
Golly,
good.
I feel like I was there again. That's awesome.
Awesome, man.
Well, the last question I have for you is what is on your bucket list? What do you want to hunt that you would consider a once in a lifetime hunt for you?
Well, mountain goats. I
I
gotta
figured.
put that number one. I certainly want redemption at an elk. I missed an elk early in my archery career out in Idaho. And the other one that really sticks out to me. So my graduate school was down in New Zealand actually, and I wasn't
Oh,
hunting there yet. I was doing a lot of paddling and fly fishing. But they have Himalayan tar in the mountains of New Zealand, and so I always kind of told myself that I would love to go back there to that place that I love and hunt. So I would say tar is probably the other one that is really high for me.
that's awesome, man. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Well, Kendrick, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing everything about the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance with myself and our listeners. Before we hang it up, if folks want to learn more or get involved, how do they do that?
Yeah, so we actually we just sort of released and announced our new membership levels. So we sort of revamped everything. We've got some awesome gear discounts in there for you, and then trials for things like Onyx and Tag Hub and all that. So go check that out. We just revamped our life membership as well. GoToAlliance.org is how to find us. And then we're on Instagram as well. So yeah, get involved. If you sign up and do the membership, even the basic annual membership will get you on the email list. And then that's also the best way to get involved with checking out our webinars. We have scientists that come on and talk about their studies. We usually do an annual hunt one where we bring on people that have done a ton of goat hunts and share awesome knowledge. And then also, if you really want to do the goat count, that's the way to know about it as fast as possible, because they do fill up because people love them. So that's the best thing to do is just join as a member, and then you can keep learning more.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it. We'll have to have you back at some point. So
you got it, man. Well, thanks very much. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can also just email me at sponsorship@goatalliance.org. And yeah, we'll talk goats. If you want to talk conservation or hunting, I'll find the right person for you.
awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time. For our listeners, appreciate y'all tuning in to another episode. Be sure you go check out everything that they're doing over there at the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. And with that, I'll be back with you guys again next week for another podcast. Catch you then.